No.
Are we official? We're officially on the Seahawks Draft Lounge here, live from the VMAC. Hi, Danny.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
Danny O'Neill, John Clayton.
Hi, Bob.
Dave Wyman over here, taking everybody through this entire journey of the Seahawks' 18th overall pick that I don't believe any of us think they're going to use. But is there anybody that disagrees with that, by the way? That they're
No.
Anybody think they're going to use their 18th overall pick?
I mean, the question is, are they going to have a draft choice today? That's what we
Right.
still don't know. I still think there's a chance because they can make 2 trade downs and still be in the first round.
But the idea of them using 18 seems absolutely
nah.
impossible, being as they don't have a draft pick in the second round or third round, and we know how much Schneider and Carroll covet picks.
I'm not 100% sure of that for this simple reason.
I think we should bet on it right now.
Well, if you're asking me to bet, like I think there's like a 10% chance they end up using
I'll take the under.
18th. Yeah, it's a 10% chance. But I would say this simply because you look back to 2010, their first draft, and Earl Thomas was a player that they had their sights on. They were hoping they were going to get at 14, but they didn't think he was going to be there. They picked 6 overall. They took Russell Okung. And then the expectation that they had was that they were going to trade back from 14 because John Schneider did not believe Earl Thomas was going to be there. He thought Earl Thomas was going to be taken. And it gets down to on the clock, and they have a deal arranged because Philadelphia, who just lost Brian Dawkins, who ended up leaving the Eagles and going to the Broncos, Philadelphia trades up in front of Seattle. And as soon as that happened, John believed – hey, they're coming to get Earl Thomas, and we just lost out on him. They were on the phone to outline the trade. Well, Philadelphia took Brandon Graham, who turned out to be a pretty good player, but when Earl Thomas was there, they pulled the trigger on it. So I don't doubt that there's a scenario that exists where if Seattle's on the clock at 18 and there's a player there, that they're not going to let him go by.
Yeah, it's funny what I was asked recently, like when you think of a first rounder, a first rounder, right? I kind of always felt that way, but if you think that there's only 12 or 13 guys in the first round with a first-round grade, and those guys are all picked, why in the world would you not trade it back, right? So,
Well, Dave, your guy John Lynch from Stanford said he has 30 first-round grades.
yeah.
Nobody in the league has 30 first-round grades other than the 49ers.
Yeah, you get a chance to talk to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Is that the consensus?
No, the consensus is 15 to 17.
Yeah.
I mean, like the Dallas Cowboys have 17.
Right.
I think the Green Bay Packers have 15. And again, that's the grades. I'm sure Seattle probably has 15, maybe 16 that are going to be graded first-round picks. And understand, I mean, a lot of that's because of scheme. I mean, a 3-4 defensive end or 3-4 linebacker is not going to be graded like a first-rounder here because it's a 4-3 team.
Yep.
And so a lot of that goes into why you say, well, gee, that means there's so few first-rounders. No, it's first-rounders who fit the grades of those teams.
Yeah. And I think John tries to just grade guys for who they are and what they are, and then sometimes they'll try to make guys fit. But, yeah, I think that I think Danny's right, though. If you say I got 12 guys and you're pretty sure that everybody's going to pick them, but like you said, everybody has their different idea of a player and whether or not he's a first-round draft choice. So, like last year, John felt like he got 7 players in that draft with a second-round grade. And so I don't think everybody felt that way. So it depends on, how you do your evaluation. And I think here, probably more than anywhere else, they don't care what everybody else thinks.
Right.
They're going to make their evaluation and go with what they do.
But when you look at the fact that they don't have a second rounder, they don't have a third rounder, you got a ton of holes to fill, right? You got a lot of secondary pieces to put in, somebody on the defensive line, a running back. Is there one player that they're going to pick at 18 that's going to be a difference maker for this team's success or failure next year? I mean, I don't know that anybody that's going to be there at 18 they look at and go, well, this is worth not accumulating more picks. He's going to be a difference maker. I don't know, unless Vita Vea falls there or something like that. Realistically, who's available at 18 that's going to be more valuable to them than accumulating more picks to address all these holes that they have? Because, I mean, there's been a lot of attrition here with Bennett gone and April gone and Chancellor gone and Sherman gone and Byron Maxwell's gone and Jeremy Lane's gone. I mean, these are holes that were occupied, whether you think these guys were great or not. They don't currently have the bodies or the depth to fill them all.
Well, that's where I think that there could be one position, and I think you went down the right avenue talking about defensive end. Because let's say, for example, Harold Landry or Marcus Davenport. they might be the pass rushing defensive ends that could intrigue them at 18.
Where they feel like we
and
have
again,
to
if
use
they
this
have,
pick.
let's say that they have top 15 grades on both of those, and one of those is available, that might be the tempting piece that would keep them there at 18. But let's say it's a running back. Well, this is a good running back draft where there's 10 or 11 guys that are going to be taken in the first 3 rounds. Okay, well, if you move down, then you're going to get the 3rd-round picks to be able to take one of those guys, and so you can get a good running back. I mean, maybe a cornerback, and again, this team has been so good at picking cornerbacks waiting, they're not going to rush for that. So I think really the one position, and I don't buy the offensive line argument. Danny, do you buy that they're going to draft an offensive lineman with the 1st rounder? I don't.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that you look at the resources that they've sunk into the offensive line. There's no team that's drafted more offensive linemen or used as many high choices on offensive line as the Seattle Seahawks going back to 2010. And I think the change, and you pointed to, John, that would they use another pick? I think they believe they're going to get a boost from Mike Solari working with some of those, and that they're, as opposed to being more inclined to spend another choice on an offensive lineman, see what Solari makes out of the group that he's now inheriting, that Tom Cable had coached for the past 7 seasons.
Yeah, and I don't know that they would agree with that there's lots of holes on this team. I feel like they still feel as if it's going to be hard for these rookies to make this team. A couple of guys that I'll mention, we've talked about them a lot on our show, is Tedrick Thompson and Delano Hill. And, Pete and John both pointed out the other day that Cam Chancellor, his rookie year, was a special team guy and was backing up Lawyer Malloy, and they have a lot of confidence in some of those guys. And those are guys that we haven't seen. And I think for fans, it does feel like a hole. But I don't think they feel that way. But
you still have to fill the depth, right? So if all those guys get bumped up into starters, let's say they're all great, and Tedrick Thompson, Delano Hill, Mike Tyson, all these guys move up, and they're now guys you're counting on, you still have to fill in the gap that they were occupying, right? So you don't have the depth. So they're whether it's a starter hole or a depth hole, there's just currently the roster is not. You can look at the roster and see it's not deep. You got a lot of bodies you still need to bring in.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I just think that they're evaluating their guys differently than we all are, and a lot of it for us. And look, it's the same for everybody. We're not seeing all the film. We're not seeing all the stuff that's going on at practice, and we're not listening to how they're evaluating their players. So, but anyway, yeah, you're right about that. I mean, you do have to get every year. You're trying to get new guys, and you especially want to hit with the draft choices because they're so cheap. It's so nice. We talk about this a lot on our show as well, Danny, that, how sweet was that when they had Russell Wilson and they were paying him $600,000. Now you're paying him $25 million, and you just got so much more room for guys that you can pay that, you drafted 5-6 years ago, and you want to, extend them.
John, you were probably the guy that got the most access to John in the lead up to the draft. What was your sense of what he thinks about the quality of talent in this draft?
I think you get the idea from even the Monday press conference that he doesn't think it's as good as maybe some past drafts because, again, they're more judicious right now with some of the grades. Like they said, they're not going to make excuses right now to come out and say, okay, this guy's good and this guy's not. And so they're going to try to have a shorter type of list. And if he's having a shorter type of list, because remember, like 2 years ago, he had such a long list of guys that were draftable. Now there's less guys that, are going to be considered draftable. So I think what you could see, it's a good draft, but it's not a great draft. And again, it works in some areas for strengths for the Seahawks that needs, like running back. If you need a running back, this is the year to try to get one. Okay, so they're okay there. For a pass rushing defensive end, once you get past the first round, you may have problems. That's because it's a big drop off there. Offensive line, if you're looking for tackles, well, not a great draft after the first round. Okay for guards, okay for centers. But I think overall, listen, John Schneider loves these drafts, and the big thing that he's done for 2.5 days, he locks himself up in his office, he starts to contemplate, he starts to think through what teams are going to do in rounds 2 and 3 to see, okay, if I trade back here, if I can do this, can I get the guys that I want? This is what he does so well, and having access to being able to talk to him about those things was just great, and I know that he's well prepared for this, and so here's a thing I want to throw out. Okay, so now let's say that one of the defensive ends available at 18 and they take him. Does that change the equation on an Earl Thomas trade? Story came out earlier today that the two teams have been discussing the possibility of a second-round choice, obviously with a little bit more added to it. So if they take a player at 18, does that increase the Earl Thomas chances of a trade?
It's a good question. I don't know. I would be surprised if they elected to take a second rounder in exchange for him, and that was it. To me, that's not worth it.
No, it's second rounder and more. Let's say 2, 4, and a 6. With a swap, maybe.
I don't want to see him trade Earl, man. I got to be honest. I understand if they do, and I was saying that today. I get it. If they just feel like this is untenable, he wants whatever the number is, $18 million a year, and we're only offering 13 or whatever. That gap is too big. We're not going to close that gap. Or he really doesn't want to be here. They know that behind the scenes. If they make the move, I get it. But outside of that, I'd like to see Earl stay here. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think especially with a secondary that's going to be inexperienced or young or both, right? It's going to be new guys. If Cam's gone, if Richard's gone, if Byron Maxwell's gone, and Lane is gone, yeah, you got Bradley McDougald there. You've got a couple familiar pieces, but not a ton of experience. He's the eraser. He's the one that cleans up all those mistakes. I think he's that much more valuable this year to that secondary with all of those guys gone.
Yeah, I'm going back to that the draft is a crapshoot. I'm going back that way because
no doubt about that.
You know, look, you could bring up a number of different players, and I always talk about the year I was drafted. So I was a second rounder. You know, I probably was a second rounder at the end, like, you know, second or third round as far as my career went, right? There was guys drafted in the first round that were washed out in 2 years. And then there was a guy drafted in the 5th round named Hardy Nickerson. And, John, I'll ask you, is he a Hall of Famer?
Borderline.
Borderline Hall of Famer. I just admired the heck out of his play. And he wasn't a great – I mean, he was a good – he made lots of tackles at Cal. I watched him on film a lot, but he wasn't the same player that he was in the NFL. And so you just never –
he was one of the first safeties to convert to linebacker.
Well, he played linebacker at Cal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
started out a little bit, but what a great player.
Yeah, and he was a little bit on the smaller side, but anyway, yeah, you've got a bird in the hand with Earl Thomas. You know, he's a Hall of Fame type of player, and
proven
I feel like
commodity.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, you're trading that away for picks, and I think these guys put so much time into it. Can you imagine if you're a scout and you've got a guy that you've been working on and you're pushing and everything, and they don't even draft him, and you've put 11 months into work for this, and I think you have to be really disciplined on that day, which is today, of, you know, just make sure that you're, you know, not getting too involved or looking myopically at one player. You know, you have to be really disciplined to not, you know, go, hey, man, this is my guy, we got to go with him, because, you know, again, Earl is a proven player, and he's a really good one. I don't see a better safety in the NFL. There's not a better safety in the NFL. And then you were talking about being back there and cleaning things up, and I'm really interested to see how Sherm does down in San Francisco, because he was a great corner here, but we've seen corners leave here and go other places and not have success, and I think a lot of that has to do with Earl's play and knowing that, you know, all the little things that he does that allows them to be better players. So that's where Earl is, and I've never, ever wanted to trade him from the get-go.
I'd say this, John. If they pick at 18, I do think there's a bigger chance that they trade, because they trade Earl. Because if they take a player at 18, that makes me think that on the one hand, either that guy's so good and such a value that they pass up the opportunity to get more depth, because they could probably, by trading back, end up that first-round pick, turn it to a second round and 2/3, I think, pretty easily.
The second rounder is the problem. I mean, easily 2/3. I mean, they need a break. They need a quarterback break to get that second rounder, because you need somebody to be almost in the middle of the second round to jump up that high. Or, you know, so that's the tougher part, getting the second rounder. But the third rounders, they can add up.
Yeah. So if you take that, if they are able to draft a player at 18, then I think there might be. I looked at the reports that came out today, and I think there's a bit of a stare down going down between the Cowboys and the Seahawks, and that the Cowboys have said we're not offering more than a second. And the Seahawks have said we're not really interested in trading Earl for a second-round pick, and that this will be everything I've seen from the Seahawks in the past couple of years is that they stand by the value that they put on players. Last year, they weren't going to trade Richard Sherman unless they got a first and a third, and when they didn't get it, Richard Sherman came back and played a season. I think they've got a higher price on Earl. The uncertainty, though, is Earl's contract and the fact that he's looking for an extension. And I know John Schneider said last week that he'd not gotten any indication from Earl's agents that he was planning to hold out. The timing of that's also pretty convenient, because if you're John Schneider, you don't want it to appear that you're negotiating with the edge of a knife held to your throat about that.
Hey, by the way, did you hear that the Browns just made a phone call to a quarterback?
Yeah,
The one answering the phone was Baker Mayfield. Looks like Baker Mayfield's going to be the first pick in the draft over Sam Darnold. Watch the craziness now begin.
I was a little concerned when I saw
I wasn't
Darnold
buying
tonight.
that. I thought that was all nonsense. I mean, this is the ultimate time of deceit and deception, right, around the draft.
Well, here's what I think the Browns should do. They should pick a quarterback at 1, and they should pick another quarterback at 4, because these things tend to go like either or. So if you take 2, the chances of you getting one of them that doesn't stink are much better.
Well, we're going to find out here.
They've had such a terrible track record with these quarterbacks, right? Whether it's Manziel, whether
just
it's
because
Brandon
they've
Weeden.
had 29 quarterbacks since 1999 to start?
Who's the best of the quarterbacks in that time? Is it Couch?
They did.
Probably Josh McCown.
They took Baker
It's
Mayfield.
official. Baker Mayfield is the number 1 overall pick for the Cleveland Browns.
All 6 foot of them.
He's the first quarterback who's grabbed his bathing suit area during his final season of college football that wound up getting picked number 1 overall.
That's a very interesting stat, Danny.
Yeah.
Hang on to that one.
Is that a Lake Erie thing?
Yeah, I don't know.
How did this change, John? How do you
know what
think?
I wonder now?
Do you think they were never really that
Andy
into
may
Baker
back me
Mayfield,
up on this.
or that into Sam Darnold?
No, I wonder if it's Scott McLuhan. Because I know Scott McLuhan really liked Baker Mayfield. Now, Scott's working with John Dorsey and, came in, and John Dorsey made his decision on the quarterback 6 weeks ago. I mean, he told the owner 6 weeks ago who he was taking. Obviously, now it's Baker Mayfield. And then he told Hugh Jackson 2 days ago. So far, I don't think he's told his wife. I know he's talked to Baker Mayfield and told him this, but I wonder if it's Scott McLuhan, because I know Scott really liked Baker Mayfield, and when he went to the Browns organization, he thought that they were going to go Sam Darnold. Could Scott have talked him into Baker Mayfield?
It's very interesting. You saw the picture of their draft room there on the NFL Network, and there was Scott sitting right there. I'm shocked, because I am too. I think you've got a lot of uncertainties about how Baker Mayfield's going to handle the stardom.
And then you just got done with Johnny Manziel. So you've had what people perceive to be a version of him, whether that's fair or unfair. That's how he's perceived, as a guy who's a bit of a wild card. We're not sure if he's going to be a problem. How much does he love football? All that good stuff that was attached to Manziel. You just got done with that. You bring in Deshaun Kaiser, who was not good. You brought in Brandon Weeden, who's not good. I mean, you
Cody
threw out
Kessler.
the number. I mean, it's just year after year, and this feels like a very Browns move, right?
Well, yeah, it's just so interesting to see how differently teams value players, and so this is going to be a very interesting draft, and it's starting off right off the get-go.
Well, you know what's interesting now?
Yeah.
If the Giants were going to take a quarterback, it might be Sam Darnold. They weren't going to take Josh Allen. They weren't going to take Baker Mayfield. They're probably going to take Deshaun Barkley. Now, all of a sudden, Darnold is sitting there at 2. I'm sure as we're speaking, John Elway is on the phone with the Giants. They're sitting with the number 5 pick. And other teams are now talking about maybe trading up for Sam Darnold. With a Giant team that is reluctant to make trades, they'd rather just make the pick. But would they take Darnold over Barkley or Darnold over Chubb?
Wow, I guess I didn't think Baker Mayfield was going to be that interesting of a story in this draft, but there's still Josh Rosen left. And then when we get later, and this is down the road, but you're looking at guys like Hercules Mataafa, you're looking at Shaquem Griffin, who is a great player who is missing his left hand, and how they're going to value him. And there's a lot of really intriguing stories. This is really cool though, because you hear what the media says, what we all talk about, and on this day you find out what the teams really think. And man, this is a huge shock. Did you get
But at least
any word,
for more than a dozen years, the media was right and the Browns were wrong.
Yeah. So
did you have any idea, John, at all? Did you hear anybody saying that you thought Baker Mayfield would go number 1?
I mean, about 3 weeks ago, there was a little buzz about that. And it was funny. Now, Tony Grossi, who's been covering the team in Cleveland for 3 decades, he's on ESPN radio in Cleveland. He talked to 3 guys in the organization today. One guy told him, no, I'll tell you it's Mayfield. The other guy says, no, I'll tell you it's Darnold. And then the other guy says, no, it was Josh Allen. So it's like it was all confusion, and now we get the upset in the sense it's Baker Mayfield.
And that sums up to the draft, doesn't it? Deception, misdirection.
You do have that. The one thing with Cleveland, somebody brought this up today, because I thought some of the uncertainty about number 1 overall was at the request of the NFL, that the NFL wanted the teams to keep it quiet and asked the Browns to increase the suspense and going into a draft not knowing who the number 1 overall pick is. The fact that the Browns hold the 4th overall pick, there's actually some incentive to keep it quiet, because if you know what you're going to do, you then get the benefit of the confusion if your pick doesn't go as expected And I would say this: people are probably surprised within the league. They certainly weren't sure that that's who the Browns were picking. Now you get to see how things might shake out in front of you, and maybe some of the rush decision making plays to your benefit in terms of who you'll get. Like, I think they'd probably love to get Saquon Barkley at number 4 if that happens.
Oh, yeah, no question. By the way, Melissa Jacobs just tweeted this out. Browns consultant Scott McCloughan was a huge Baker Mayfield guy last October in an interview with Fox Sports Radio. And so I think the McCloughan influence did do this as far as Mayfield. Now we'll see if it's right.
Riskiest quarterback chosen number 1 overall since, because you look at it, Tim Couch, I don't remember there being a lot of doubt about where Couch was going to go, that he was the best quarterback. The idea that, I guess, Alex Smith, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. By the way, the Giants just took Saquon Barkley, so the Browns don't need to worry about that now at number 4.
I think he's the safest guy in the top 10. I mean, you look at just his play on the field. Danny, you called him the cyborg.
Yeah, he is. when he had that play where he's in the air, and he gets hit, and he just moves like parallel to the ground, like 5 yards, lands and keeps running. You're like, that's not
and he never broke stride.
Oh.
But then you saw his combine workout, and from all accounts, he's just a fantastic kid. You know, loves football, everything. So, pretty safe bet right there. And the Giants, their running game, they had Orleans Darkwa last year, right?
Yeah.
Was their big name. So, they definitely need somebody in that regard.
And this is so typical of the Giants because, again, they're reluctant to trade. Now, I know that they changed general managers. Dave Gettleman's there, but he's been a Giant guy before he was a Panther general manager. And so they prefer to pick and what they believe, and I think you can look at it in the sense that if you take a running back with an older quarterback or a younger quarterback, it makes it easier for the transition with the quarterback. Go for John Elway in his last few years with the success of Terrell Davis. Got him 2 Super Bowl rings. Now, that may not do it for a 37-year-old Eli Manning, but it'll make him maybe stay with them 2 or 3 more years.
But they don't have a backup that they believe in, do they?
No, they have Davis Webb.
Yeah, but they brought in Geno Smith to end Eli Manning's streak, so that tells me they don't believe in Webb. In a lost season, wasn't that the perfect opportunity to bring in the young guy and say, all right, let's see what we got?
It would be, but again, now we see what the Giants wanted. I mean, they wanted Eli Manning because, again, what they're thinking, remember, they draft quarterbacks, maybe 5th round, Ryan Nassib being one. They had him for 4 years. He didn't play a down. He's no longer in the league. Eli Manning plays every play. He's kind of like Russell Wilson. He doesn't miss plays, and so now it looks like they think, whether they're right or wrong, Eli's going to be there 2 or 3 more years.
I'd say this. My economist friend who I talked to about not taking running backs in the top 20.
Your economist friend?
Yeah. He's a practicing economist, and he's looked at sort of the information, the data about it, and he said it's a terrible idea to use a top 20 pick on a running back.
And that's because?
3 different reasons. The history of the productivity of running backs, guys chosen in the top 20 aren't any more likely to be better, more effective, more efficient, all of those different things than running back chosen in the 2nd round, the 3rd round, the 4th round. There's no, and that if you look in over like a 20-year span, those running backs that were chosen in the top 20 cumulatively averaged 4.2 yards, which is the average gain of all running backs in the league in that
would have
time.
been outstanding for the Seahawks.
Yeah, it would have been great
year.
for the Seahawks. And then you don't get a financial advantage. If you get a quarterback in the top of the draft and he ends up to be a starter, huge financial incentive. Saquon Barkley is going to be one of the highest paid running backs in the league because that's a position that's been devalued. So I have a newfound faith or resistance to choosing running backs in the top 20 picks.
Because you're your economist friend.
Yeah, I buy it hook, line, and sinker.
Okay, all right. Well, now the Jets are on the clock. What are they going to do?
Well, they're taking a quarterback. Now, they wanted Baker Mayfield, and so now the choice – do they go – because the way I had it broken down, which obviously was wrong, that Cleveland and Denver would want the big, strong-arm quarterback. So what ends up happening, Baker Mayfield goes to Cleveland. And so what I thought the Jets and the Bills, they wanted the other quarterbacks would have been Mayfield, who's faster to be able to be on the field, and then maybe Josh Rosen. So now the debate has to be, do you take Darnold, who's a real talent, or do you take Josh Rosen, or do you take Josh Allen? I think they take Darnold, but we'll see.
I want to see him take Geno Smith. He's a kid out of West Virginia. People have talked about a lot. I mean, there's the possibility he might get socked in his jaw at some point, but there's a lot of upside there.
I think his eligibility's done.
He's done? He's no longer there? Where did he end up signing? San Diego?
No, Giants.
Giants?
I saw an interview with Josh Rosen the other night. For the first time I've really heard him speak. I kind of got that vibe that people have talked about. He's got a little edge to him. He was asked a fairly innocuous question, And then he was kind of given an answer like, I'm done with it. Like, he goes, I don't know, man. It's, he just seemed irritated by the question. I'm thinking, you're basically auditioning now. You're trying to talk yourself up into the draft. And he seemed like, I don't have time for this.
Dave absolutely loves the ESPN The Magazine cover this week's, which includes Rosen going like this.
Yeah, finger up to his mouth, hushing everybody. I don't know. He doesn't seem like a football player to me. I think he's got other things. He fancies himself as an intellectual, and usually people that think they're smart aren't. And look, I'm sure he's
hold on. Jim Mora wants to talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and he defended him against Brock, and there was some question about toughness, supposedly, but yeah, he just doesn't seem like a football guy to me. So that's
and this is the spot where he said he wouldn't be a good fit, right, in New York. Was that, or was it Cleveland? He thought he'd fit in New York, but not in Cleveland.
He thought not in Cleveland because he didn't. He mentioned grit,
blue collar,
blue collar type of people, and that he's not that kind of guy. And I'm like, that's a pretty bad description of your player. I mean, you want a gritty guy that's a football player, but I think he's right. I think he's not a gritty guy, and he doesn't.
Well, I mean,
he doesn't
you
have that old
you have
school.
to like Saquon. I mean, you have to like Sam Darnold because he played linebacker a little bit in high school.
Oh, did he?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the quarterback with the neck roll.
Yeah.
We used to have that. Everybody plays both ways. So no, yeah, you got to like that part of it, but
because it brings up memories of Jim Kelly.
Yeah, right.
I still remember
Josh
covering
Rosen
Jim Kelly
linebacker.
as a redshirted freshman. He's at Penn State, and that was a year that they had a bad year. They went 7-5, and Kelly beats them. And so I go to Kelly after the game, and he said, well, what's the feeling you have with this one? He says, hey, all I know is that Joe Paterno wanted me as a linebacker. I guess I can't play quarterback. Threw 3 touchdown passes that game in State College.
Wow. We had Ray Roberts on today, and he was talking, and he was kind of echoing what I thought about Darnold. Is I watched him like I'd never watched him before. I didn't really pay a ton of attention to him, but there was so much hype going into this past season. I'm like, okay, let me sit down and watch this guy. I don't really understand what everybody's seeing. I don't know what I'm missing. Brock tells me, no, you don't understand, and I'll trust Brock. But I'm just saying what is special about him or perceived to be special to me is not obvious. This is a guy that's got, just over 20-some starts as a quarterback, played 2 or 3 years at that position, turns the ball over a lot. I don't know what I'm missing. Are you guys sold on him being a surefire pick?
I would agree with Bob on that because John Elway
and he's now a member of the Jets, by the way.
Yeah, he just got drafted by the Jets. So I was asking Elway about a quarterback one time, and he's good arm, great feet, but doesn't have that it factor. I would say that's Sam Darnold. But, hey, look, I always assume that these guys that are poring over film and have been around him, they know more than I do, and I'm sure they're seeing some things. But Sam Darnold now a Jet.
By the way, does that not make the Jets look brilliant? And the reason I say that is because people were criticizing him like crazy. You gave up 3 second-round picks to get Baker Mayfield. Well, guess what? They gave up 3 second-round picks, and they got Sam Darnold. Charlie Casser, the NFL Network, contacted 24 teams. 17 said Darnold's the best quarterback in this draft. The next one was 3. I think it was Mayfield. So I think now, by trading up the 3 second-round picks, they got, most people think, the best quarterback in this draft.
Why is he considered the best? Why do so many people jump on that train?
I'll
I
say
mean,
this.
they know more than I do, like Dave said. But to me, his gift is not as obvious as people seem to.
I liked how
about.
competitive he was. He's played 2 years at USC, so he's pretty young.
20-4.
I do think that he was more uneven this past season than he was when he stepped in and replaced Max Brown. And what you saw in that game against Penn State in the Rose Bowl I thought he was epic. I thought he was incredible. His ability to make plays and improvise. I think he's pretty stout. He moved around. I thought he had a couple stinkers last season. I thought he looked terrible against Washington State. But I think that his arm, of all the guys that are there, I think there were the least questions about his makeup, and that the sort of the mentality that he has, the equipment that he brings in. I don't know if he's going to be a good quarterback in the NFL. I'm fairly certain that both Rosen and Mayfield will not be. I just don't think that their mentality is right for the position or the scrutiny that's going to come with the roles that they're stepping into.
I think one of the things that people fell in love with him is he does have, from what I know about mechanics, you watch his footwork and how he comes balanced before he throws, and I think the NFL falls in love with that. And he's a pretty solid guy. I think he's another safe draft choice. You know, I think Baker Mayfield, you're taking a chance, but Saquon Barkley, Darnold, you know, Rosen, you're taking a chance. But I feel like it's a safe bet, and that he, you know, you can develop him over a period of time. He's going to be a good NFL player.
Yeah, and I don't doubt that he's got the ability to become a great quarterback. All I'm saying is, in really focusing on him this year, I just seem to be missing what everybody was raving about. Like you said, there were moments, but I feel like there's that moment for a ton of college quarterbacks where, man, that was a great throw.
But he's also one of the youngest quarterbacks to ever come into the league. He's not allowed to drink yet. He's not 21.
Wow.
My guess is he might be able to find a way to get a beverage somewhere or another.
Will help him out.
The two stories I like, they had the USC workout. It was raining. The coaches, and they said, okay, we're going to move this inside. And Darnold said, no way. I'm going outside. I'm trying to get to Cleveland. I'm going to go throw in the conditions. And he lit it up. And then a couple weeks later, there was a backup workout for a couple of the wide receivers who were injured at USC. He paid to fly back to USC to give them a good quarterback to be able to throw to the wide receivers.
Wow.
That's pretty good character.
Yeah.
He's gritty.
Yeah, I would say that. The game he played against Washington, his redshirt freshman season, so not 2017 but 2016, he was great, and that was a really good defense. Washington's defense was able to – he looked better against that defense than Alabama did. I was really impressed in how he played as a freshman. I thought he took a step back last season, but of all the guys, I would think that there's the fewest questions about him. Other than his haircut, he's kind of got a little bouffant going on today. Like it seems
he's got
to
a lot
be
of hair.
inflated. Yeah, it's a lot, and a low forehead.
Yeah,
like more like a two-head.
Who's got the most intrigue in terms of players? To me, there were two players here that you were watching and just wondering where they're going to go. And the first one went, right? It was Baker Mayfield. The other one to me is Shaquem Griffin. Those are the two players to me that hold the most intrigue. Not that they're the best players, but just their stories, and you're just curious about where they land because they're unique in their own individual ways as compared to everybody else. I mean, Saquon Barkley, he's a brilliant player. Yeah. You think he's safe. Darnold, you look at him, he's safe. You're not that dialed into his story like you are with Griffin, the way you are with Mayfield.
Especially Shaquem Griffin, because I've asked a lot of scouts and people in the NFL, and you know what the answer I get is, I don't know. You know, they really don't know. And I think he's such a great player. He's a proven player, but, you know, I think.
Is he a third rounder? Is he a
I don't know.
How's
I
he
just
perceived?
go by Gil Brandt. Had him on the podcast, schooled with the professor 2 weeks ago. And, you know, Gil invites the players to the draft. And he's not going to embarrass them. He invited Griffin. And the idea is he going to have Griffin sit there for 3 days and not get drafted? I think he did this with the idea he's going to go in the second or third round. And that's what he does. He'll check with some teams, see where they have him graded. And remember, this is a screw-up by the National Scouting Service for not even inviting him to the Combine. Right. He comes in and gives the best linebacker numbers in Combine history, and now has pushed himself probably to the second or third round.
Why did they not invite him to the Combine?
Probably because they had a little bias because of the arm. That would be my guess. Because obviously you can't look at the film and say he shouldn't be invited. I mean, he was the Defensive Conference Player of the Year. He did it there. He never misses tackles. He makes big plays, but they probably thought, well, if some team wants him, why don't they go check him out individually? Enough teams, I think, protested. They got him to the Combine, and he was one of the main stories of the Combine.
It's really –
I'm intrigued by it.
Yeah, I am too. I would think that teams would end up talking themselves into players like Shaquem Griffin more often. Like if you've never seen anything like that, but the productivity's there, and you're sort of they spend a lot of time talking about character and sort of football character and personnel. And somebody who's able to overcome something like that, you would think that you would say, like, man, that guy's got the characteristics, the personality, the makeup that you need. Yet it almost seems to work the exact opposite way because they've never seen somebody excel without having a hand. That you're like, well, I just don't think he can do it, and I love everything about him, but I'm not going to be the one that takes that chance. So it's almost like they don't get the benefit of the doubt. In fact, they get the negative benefit of the doubt that comes with it.
By the way, the Browns have their second pick in. Who do you think it's going to be, John?
It's funny because
Rosen. Take Rosen.
No,
two quarterbacks?
Yeah.
Bradley Chubb, apparently they got a picture of Bradley Chubb, and he was not happy. So it may not be the defensive end. So this could, believe it or not, be Quentin Nelson.
Oh, the guard from Notre
Could be the
Dame.
guard from Notre Dame.
Not a guard.
I know.
Dave thinks
guard
guards are
goes
dime a
number
dozen.
four.
The Browns selection.
Get him off the street.
You going guard? What do you think, Dave?
No, I think it's going to be the pass rusher.
Oh, Denzel Ward, the
Denzel Ward.
cornerback.
A corner.
Wow.
All right.
That's
Ohio
high
State
for a corner,
cornerback.
man. You do
So-
not usually see corners go that high.
But, you know, I guess we have to say this. It's like we love John Dorsey. We love Scott McCloughan. But this is the Browns.
Come on,
Does this feel like a
John.
very
It's the
Browns
Browns.
pick?
Can't say that anymore. When
I
You
just
think that's
did.
what's happened?
What's that?
Like it's you can take
Yeah,
the
yeah.
executives out of Cleveland and they'll be okay, but you put the
They
executives
were
into
overruled by
Cleveland.
Kevin Costner. Draft day.
I like that, Daddy. Once they're in Cleveland, it's like they're infected.
Yeah, that's all of a
I
sudden.
hadn't seen his name attached to the Browns either. So
No,
this feels very Cleveland to me.
It does.
This is very
That's what I
off,
say that.
Where people are looking at it going, yeah, of course. Of
No,
course
they
they're
went to
going to go. They're
analytics.
going to take a left when everybody thinks they're going right.
Generally, you don't see corners go in the top 5, and a big part of the reason is because guys and teams will believe that you'll have 3 or 4 corners that are, you can get a good corner at 12. Like you don't have to.
Yeah.
The drop off from the best corner to the next best corner isn't so large that you have to make that sort of pick. Because I'm trying to think of the most recent corners that you've seen taken that high. Like that's up in a rarefied air for that position.
Where was Charles Woodson selected?
Like 6th or 5th, something like,
Fifth or
something like that.
sixth?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but
I mean,
that's-
I agree
man,
with you. It's rare.
that's-
I mean, look
that's
how
like
far back you got to
99.
look.
Yeah, that you'd be
Patrick
there.
Peterson
And that's
was
what
he
did,
was lower.
Didn't
Peterson
Woodson
might have
beat
been
out
7.
Was he
6
was he
or
top,
7. He's
he
top
was top
10.
10.
Yeah,
Didn't Woodson beat out Peyton Manning that year for
the Heisman.
Yeah. So was Patrick Peterson the last top 10 corner? I'd have to go back and look, but just off the top of my head, it feels like he was.
Morris Claiborne with the Cowboys, I
Wasn't he
believe
sixth,
was.
I think.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
he was in that 6 to
Yeah.
10 range.
Yeah, like I mean, there's going to be 2 or 3 taken,
Should
and
I
maybe,
go get a
maybe
quarter?
3 in the top 10. So top 10 cornerbacks, that's not unusual. But you're right, top 5 cornerbacks, that is unusual.
Maybe I should get a computer out so I could be able to look stuff up. Do
Go
you think
for
that
it.
would
That
look
just
look
occurred to me too,
unprofessional?
Danny.
Okay, I'm gonna go get my
Would it look
computer.
unprofessional? You're wearing a suit. You look like a pro. I'm wearing a hat. Come on. He's the one that's jazzing this place up here. Dave's got a computer too, so we're fine.
So do I.
Oh, do you have one there?
Yeah.
All right.
Solitaire was pulled up on my computer. for some
Are you
reason.
winning?
Yeah, no, I was losing.
I just love that the Browns are always kind of making the moves where everybody kind of shakes their head and goes, "Yep, that's
But-
Cleveland." You had two picks in
Clayton,
the top 5, and people are going to right tomorrow. You watch, they're going to say, "Browns screwed this up."
What,
Oh, yeah.
What
No
are they
doubt.
going to have to do for you to stop making fun of the Browns, John?
They're going to have
Make
to win,
picks that
right?
make more sense. I mean, it's like, okay, they just took a cornerback at 4 when you have Quentin Nelson, who's probably considered the best guard to come into the league since Steve Hutchinson. And you're talking about a guy like Chubb, who's one of the better defensive ends to come around in the last couple years.
Would
Sometimes
you
you
rather have
don't-
had the cornerback or the guard?
I'll take
away,
a corner.
Take away your guard
Or a
bias.
kicker.
Here's the thing, you know, I've always looked at talent this way, that in the NFL, the guys that play on the edge are rare. That a defensive end, a corner, I'll take those guys over a defensive tackle or a safety, just because they're on, you know, the hash marks are close together. There's lots of space out there, and you got to be a really special talent. Corners, I covet them, just because I was on a lot of defenses where corners are getting burned, and it's like, man, can you just cover the guy? But guys that are inside, like a guard, I mean, you can almost like make up for that, and you know, he's a guy that's not very visible, and if he can probably go through a game and not, you know, ever stand out or anything. Now, they make a difference when you start looking at the film, but so corners, yeah, I think that is a rare talent. If you can get a good one, I mean, look, Richard Sherman, you know, say what we will about him now that he left and all the things he's saying, but you never worried about him. You never worried. Even in the Jet game a couple of years ago where Brandon Marshall got after him a little bit, came back in the second half, got 2 picks, and, I mean, he always made up for it, and you never worried about that side of the field. And as a matter of fact, there was the time Aaron Rodgers said, look, you know, I didn't come your way on purpose. So, yeah, I think corners, I'm never going to clown somebody for picking a corner, you know, that high. But a guard, yeah, it's kind of a different story to me, just because how I value certain players. And if I was picking, I would much rather take a corner than a guard.
So, John, Broncos are on the clock. They going quarterback?
The one quarterback I know that would interest them is Josh Allen, but they're going to be really tempted by Chubb, and they're going to be tempted by Quentin Nelson. But, knowing John Elway, I mean, he's not going to take Josh Rosen. That's not happening. But I think that he's going to be
Is
really –
that strictly based on his personality, his edge, or just his –
he's not the type of quarterback that John really likes. I mean, he likes big, strong, hard-throwing quarterbacks, and Josh Allen has one of the strongest arms to come into the league maybe ever.
By the way, he looked fantastic. I watched him in his combine workout. I thought he looked fantastic.
He did. The one pass, he went back five steps, and 5 yards instead of 7 steps, and he threw it 77 yards in the air.
He's got a can. I mean, I guess if you're not accurate, it doesn't really matter how far you're throwing it, right?
No, that's true.
But
by the way, Joe Hayden was picked by the Browns in 2010 with the 7th pick.
Okay.
So that's a pretty high pick there. This is what, 4th or 5th?
Yeah,
Fourth.
Yeah, so, you've seen that. But other than that, it's 8th pick on trail roll by the Cardinals. And 5th pick, Patrick Peterson. You mentioned
and so the answer is?
What?
Bradley Chubb.
Chubb?
Defensive end, yeah. Broncos take Bradley Chubb.
Yeah.
That's who they're going with?
Yep.
Okay.
Good, safe bet. Again,
Oh, yeah.
defensive ends. We talk about guys that rush on the outside. It's an incredibly coveted position. I think they're a little bit more than sacks are a really big deal. If you look at that stat, turnover ratio, I mean that's very indicative. But if you look at sacks, that's a big play. That's a huge play. So if you can get a guy that can affect the quarterback and get sacks, it's valuable.
It's such
So
a
now
huge
with this pick,
momentum
we're in
play.
trade territory. Because now you got 2 quarterbacks that are sitting there, Josh Allen and Josh Rosen, the 2 Joshes. And, Arizona wants to get one of those guys, and Buffalo wants to get one of those guys. Buffalo at 12, Arizona at 15. So now we're in trade country.
Now we could see some wheeling and dealing. Do you see the Seahawks making any kind of move whatsoever that move up? Is there anybody that's sitting there that you could see them actually trying to move up? And I don't think they have the ammo, but if Vita Vea started dropping, which everybody seems to believe would fit really well here. And I think a lot of people would just love to see it because he's got the local kid who's great. But I just
No, there's they don't have the
ammo to
ammunition.
do it.
No, can't do it. I mean, no 2nd-round pick, no 3rd-round pick, no 2nd-round pick next year. And I don't think there's a desire to do it. Again, spending the time for that Washington Post story that I did with John Schneider, I mean, he makes trades up, and he's smart in making trades up. I mean, he was able to get Jaron Reed. He was able to get Tyler Lockett by moving up. But those are, of the 19 draft day trades, I think he's done 3 that have been trade ups. And when you don't have the ammunition when you're at 18 to trade up, you're not going to do it.
3 trades they've traded up. Traded up to get Jaron Reed. Traded up to get Tyler Lockett. Traded up to get Jesse Williams, the defensive tackle from Alabama.
is he 5th round?
5th
I
round
would
pick.
not have guessed that one.
Yeah, and that was more a situation. They had a ton of picks at the end of the draft, and Jesse was someone whose knee had been a question mark, but they thought
What
get him
round
in
was he?
5th round.
5th round.
5th round.
Did they move up a couple of spots for Irvin, or they just took him where they were at?
No, they had the 12th pick, and they traded back 3
Down.
spots.
Okay.
And took Irvin at 15 overall.
Okay.
So it's just never been their MO. And going back, Green Bay traded up when Schneider was there to get Clay Matthews. Mm-hmm. Like that was a guy that they moved. He was their 2nd first-round pick. So they had moved back into the 1st round to get him. That's really – John's just always had the opinion, and I think some of it comes from his faith in his scouting, that, hey, you give us more opportunities, more chances – our preparation is going to pay, even though you know that when you slide down, you're going to miss out on opportunities to take good players. And I think Seattle, in some ways, we spent a lot of time talking about what happened to their draft success, right? 2010 to 2012, they accumulated this nucleus of talent. Well, really, for the next 3 years, you saw them use some of their draft capital to try and get guys who would make an immediate impact. You saw them trade for Percy Harvin. That was 3 picks that they gave up to get Harvin. A 1st, a 3rd the next year, and a 7th that year. Saw them give up a 1st-round pick for Jimmy Graham, essentially. And I think that was with an eye toward our roster so deep that a guy that we pick at 25, he might not make much of an impact. We're better off getting a guy that we know can play. they're not at that spot as a franchise right now. They're closer to where they were in 2010 than they are to where they were in 2013.
Looking at it now, how bad was the Sheldon Richardson trade? You traded Jermaine Kearse and a second rounder for what essentially became a rental player.
It's a good question. I look at it this: I don't think Kearse was going to make the team. I think Jermaine Kearse was not going to make the team. So it's not like a question of you gave the rent. And I'm happy for Jermaine and the productivity he had. Yeah, I don't think the second-round pick worked out. I don't think that exchange, if they could do it over again, knowing what they got from Sheldon throughout the year, 1 sack, I don't think they'd do it again. I think they saw it as it's worth the shot because they felt Malik McDowell's injury was going to leave a huge hole.
See, Danny, I differ on that because what I watched with Sheldon Richardson, and see if you back me up on this, Dave. He drew double-team blocks as the season went on, and I thought what was going to happen happened. He was going to open things up for Michael Bennett, because Michael Bennett then was able to get back to that 8.5 sack level because, again, not everything was going to be doubling on him. And so Sheldon Richardson, I thought, did a great job on the run. Sure, some of the pass rush may have been gone, but remember, he was adjusting to something that he hadn't really done for a long time, being a 3-technique defensive tackle. I remember talking to him in November when he started feeling, he's like, I'm finally starting to feel comfortable about this. And so, yeah, it was a second-round venture. Unfortunately, they needed more players in free agency because they would have gotten a 4th rounder back as a compensatory pick. That would have made it look a little bit better. But I think they got true value for Sheldon Richardson.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to agree with you, John. I'll go so far as to say I think he won them a couple of games. I think he won the Ram game down there. He made plays and constant pressure. And especially the Philadelphia game. I mean, he caused that fumble on Carson Wentz, but he did so many things, taking on. Do we have a guard selected?
A guard was
Quentin
just
Nelson
taken. Quentin
going
Nelson.
to the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah. So
How's that make you feel?
Heck of a player. Yeah. We'll see. I will not be watching him, Danny.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're not going to sit
You
there
won't
and watch
zero
it.
in on Quentin.
You know what?
I'll be
You know what
watching
they
him.
said on the scouting report? He excels at holding. He's a really good holder.
He's a good holder.
Yeah. Well, he'll do well in the NFL.
Well, by the way,
'cause it's legal.
Stephen Holder is one of the guys who covers the team in Indianapolis.
Is that right?
For the
Yeah.
Indianapolis
Isn't
Stars.
that apropos?
There'll
Yeah.
be 2 holders in that team.
No, but I think Richardson was. I think he was valuable, more valuable than we thought or know. And that's also a position where you have to watch the film and go back and look and go, man, this guy, he allowed this guy to make a play, that guy to make a play. And, yeah, what was the score in the Philly game? They beat him by 10 points, something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and, look, saying that he won them a couple games is probably a stretch, but I think he helped them win that. And, when you look at how much value there is, and like when we talked about that with the kicker, I mean, last year, the guy pretty much lost him a couple of games, so yeah, you can have a player have that kind of an impact. It's just hard to see when he's at D tackle. So I liked it. I thought that it was a good move.
I thought he played well too. I know that the box score didn't always say that. A lot of what he did, as you said, doesn't
Yeah,
show
didn't
up
have
in
a
the
lot
box
of
score.
stats. Yeah.
But he did draw so much attention, and I was a little surprised that there wasn't a stronger effort to bring him back. Now I don't know what he was asking for financially, but ultimately what he signed for.
Ultimately, he can ask for $15 million, and he only ended up getting what, 8?
8.
Yeah, 8
Yeah, on a 1-year deal.
on a 1-year deal. Yeah.
So I'm curious as to why they wouldn't have offered a mate to stay here for a year.
I think it's because of the sacks. I mean, I think that's what Seattle values. Seattle values sacks on defensive line, and they feel that you can get that run-stuffing defensive tackle for about $3 or $4 million a year. And that they went and you saw them. They were happy to get Tom Johnson and the other guy whose name I constantly screw up. Shamar Moore is an actor. It's not Shamar Moore. Shamar Steven. Who's
Singular, yeah. Samar Stevens.
Yeah.
Steven. Singular.
Steven
Steven.
is the other defensive tackle they got. I think they feel that if they're going, unless you're going to pressure the passer, they're not going to pay you more than $5 million as a defensive tackle.
Hey, by the way, speaking of defensive tackles, Rick Stroud from the St. Petersburg Times, Tampa Bay is on the clock right now, says there's a chance that they could take the safety Derwin James or Vita Vea.
See, Vita would go there. Vita's an interesting player.
Yeah. Vita could end up being, according to Rick Stroud, the 7th pick in this draft.
And this is kind of the spot where people had projected him, though. I've seen him in. If you
he
follow
was
the
going
mocks,
to be 7 to 13. Everybody had him going to the Redskins.
Yeah, if you
13.
follow the mocks, this is kind of the area where his name was starting to come up.
You know, he reminds me of Cortez Kennedy, and from the standpoint of he just kind of goes wherever he wants to go, and it's
Just
kind of
does his own thing.
It's almost like he's not being blocked. Like you never see him get neutralized, and his athletic ability is amazing. We talked to him, and
But guess what?
Great
It's
kid.
not going to happen.
No, yeah.
Buffalo just traded to the 7th pick.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, they're coming
Buffalo's
for the
on the
quarterback.
clock.
There
So
you
you
go.
think they're going quarterback? Which one?
I think they go Josh Rosen.
Okay.
But they got Josh Rosen. They can go. I know they're going to take a Josh. Is
Well,
it
that's
Josh
right.
Rosen or Josh Allen?
You don't
Yep.
think they're sold on the Peterman?
No.
There was a lot of talk about Josh Allen at the end, where he got talked up to where a lot of people were thinking, okay, this guy's going to be the first pick. So it'll be
Man,
interesting.
I'd be so nervous to take him simply for the fact that his college stats aren't that great.
Yeah.
Like he's
the completion percentage thing,
the
below
completion
60.
percentage. Like, are guys going to get more accurate in the NFL? That's not usually how it works.
Well, how much of that is based on the offense that they're running there versus some of these other guys that come in with really high completion percentage, but they might be dinking and dunking, little bubble screens, little crossing patterns, and he's chucking it down the field. I don't know
good
about his
point.
receivers. I mean, I'm not saying he's not inaccurate. Maybe I'm not going to pretend I watched the guy, but I watched him in his combine workout, and I was blown away. I thought he looked really good, and he was hitting guys. So I don't know what kind of offense they run versus some of the other guys that have a much higher completion percentage.
Yeah, well, and then you have like a guy like Luke Falk who had great completion percentage, but that's what you're describing is that because of that system. So we got a chance to talk to him yesterday. Great kid, and he's another guy that is interesting and intriguing in this draft. So and Hercules Mataafa, another one. So.
By the way, the trade was for 2 second-round picks. The Bills give up 2 second-round picks to move up from 12 to 7, which now means there's a great chance that Tampa Bay could still take Vita Vea before Washington at 13, unless the Oakland Raiders take him at 10.
Boy,
What do you think, Gruden?
So they're picking 12, and they accumulated 2 second-round picks.
Yeah.
5 spots.
deal.
Yeah. Wow. Gosh, you could
But
be
remember,
able to do that.
they made a short trade a couple years ago, Jason Light, where they actually traded down, and they knew the guy because I knew who they were going to take. They were going to take the cornerback, and so they traded down like 3 spots, and they got a second-round pick, and they took the kicker Robert Aguayo, who basically lasted like about a year.
Yeah.
He was awful.
Yeah.
We were watching him on Hard Knocks, competing for the job. Didn't
yeah.
go well.
No, it did not. They ended up letting him loose. I think the thing with Josh Allen that's interesting, the Wall Street Journal had a story saying he's kind of the Rorschach test for the NFL. You see what you want to see as an NFL GM because he's the guy, like you said, Bob, when you watch him at the Combine and you see how strong his arm is, you're like, oh, man, you just get this guy in the right system, and he's been there in the hinterlands of Wyoming. Like, we'll bring him to civilization. It usually doesn't work that way, though. Like, usually, accuracy is not something that improves when you get to Jake Locker's a great example of that. I love Jake Locker and absolutely thought he was a great college quarterback and loved cheering for him. He wasn't accurate, and he wasn't accurate in college, and he didn't get more accurate with the Titans.
Well,
Any thoughts on the story that came out today about Josh Allen making, when he was like 14 or 15-year-old, very racial remarks?
yeah, how does that come out the day of the draft? Who's holding on to that? And then it's like the Laramie Tunsil thing. And they go Josh Allen, by the way.
It's Josh Allen.
Josh Allen is now a member of the
now a
Buffalo
Bill.
Bills. So
It didn't hurt him.
I find that odd. That it feels like there's people working behind the scenes like, okay, I'm going to get this guy. I'm waiting till draft day,
Kind of like
and I'm going to put it out
like
there.
the gas mask ball.
Yeah, Laramie Tunsil with
Yeah.
with that. I mean, it's just like somebody's hanging on to this. Somebody didn't just stumble on that today, right?
No.
But the fact that it became this huge story today, and obviously it didn't seem to really impact where he was taken. He was, 14, I think, when he sent those out? I'm not excusing it, but you're talking about a kid, a true kid
you're
at that point.
If I was a parent, like I would tell anyone, or if I was an agent, delete your Twitter, like up until don't keep your Twitter around from when you were a kid, and anybody that was going to get a job. The thing about the actual slurs that he used and the sentiments that were, I come from sort of I grew up in a small town full of rednecks, and the idea that you're going to make it because he used those slurs doesn't mean he's some sort of irredeemable racist.
Right.
And people that are it's terrible that he said that. And I think that if we're honest, a lot of people, like when you're 14, 15, and 16 years old, hopefully you're smart enough not to use a racial slur. but if you do, it doesn't mean that it's some sort of like window into your soul.
Right.
Like what you do is learn from that mistake and realize what those words mean. And I think how Allen handled it, from what I heard of calling Stephen A. Smith to talk about it and to apologize, and that's really all you can do. I didn't come away from it feeling like, you know what, I saw Josh Allen's true colors. I came away from it feeling like you make mistakes when you're a kid, and there are windows into seeing it, and that probably says more about his upbringing than it does about and the environment, not necessarily his upbringing, but the environment.
Wasn't part of it he's mimicking what he's listening to in terms of music and
There's
things
some
like
of that.
and those are the lyrics. It reads poorly when you're reading it on Twitter. I'm not excusing it, but at the same time, you're talking about a 14-year-old kid who's listening to hip-hop, and that's what's going on, and he's mimicking that and looking up to it and saying, that's how I talk as well.
Right.
That's how I'm going to speak.
I don't think he was expressing it as some
here's
sort
my
of
belief. I'm
some
going to
sort of
demean.
dagger. Yeah.
I
But-
missed the whole thing.
Yeah.
So
You missed it?
You didn't miss anything.
missed it.
There were some tweets from when he was a teenager that came out.
Well, he's made. I think he's probably the one guy who's made the most spectacular throws of all those quarterbacks. You look at throwing across his body and deep. I mean, he's a big, strong guy. So, and I honestly, I think that the Carson Wentz selection too has made people a little bit more bold, maybe to
Got
pick
smaller
a guy
schools
coming
or
out of
less
a smaller
known.
school. Yeah, and I heard a scout talking about this one time, and he was saying, look, some of these guys in the smaller programs, put them in a big program where there's like first class everything and weight room and trainers and stuff like that, and there's an upside there that they think that you can get from a guy who is coming in. University of Wyoming, it's not like it's in the sticks. I mean, they're in the Mountain West, and it's not.
It's kind of the sticks.
Huh?
It's kind of the sticks.
Yeah, I mean, but still, yeah, it's not like it's USC or Texas, right? So, I think that some scouts will, but that's kind of like the test you were talking about, that you make, I don't want to say excuses, but you justify things for guys, and you find all kinds of reasons why to pick a guy. It's amazing the amount of discipline I think that you have to have, because just as radio guys, we'll sit there and talk about, like, for the Mariners, Mike Zunino. We love Mike Zunino, and so you're willing to make excuses for him.
There's allowances made, yeah.
Right, and we're not selecting, teams or anything like that, but your human bias has to creep into it, and you have to have. One of the things that I love about Schneider the most is that he asks more questions, I think, than there's times where, we'll be talking about players and stuff, and I'll ask him, like, what do you think about this guy? He's like, what do you think? And I'm like, well, it doesn't really matter what I think, John. I mean, he's very inquisitive, and I think he's very aware and self-aware that, I don't think he gets caught up in, like, this is a guy and I love him, and, and then all of a sudden he steps back later and goes, man, what was I thinking? So, and look, he hasn't been 100%, but, like the Malik McDowell thing, you could really not have predicted that, I guess that's a thing that people go and rent ATVs and zip around town and stuff like that.
Really?
Yeah.
He's from a city, though, right? Detroit?
Yeah.
Look, I'll once again reference my growing up in backwards Oregon. Like, that was something hillbillies did.
Well, apparently it's like recreation.
No
I
kidding.
don't think it's strictly a hillbilly activity. Danny.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's not go that way.
People
gone
are
to the
doing
big
this
city,
in
Danny.
cities on paved streets?
Yeah.
You go to that. We're going to go down the deer hunting trail on our ATVs.
Yeah.
By the way, is that still not the best kept secret ever?
Oh, yeah, no.
Everything finds the light of day these days. It doesn't matter whether we're talking sports or politics. Everything leaks out. I still have not heard anything definitive about his injury other than it was a head injury. I don't know. Did he crack his head open? Did he break a collarbone, crack his ribs, tear a ligament? Nothing has come out about that. Not even a rumor, a whisper.
Well, and then
I'm still amazed by that.
But you
in
get
this day
into
and
the
age.
medical part of it, and it's like there's liability there. I mean, the Seahawks can't talk
But,
about
I mean,
it.
just a rumor. I mean, right?
Yeah,
That-
you're right, though.
that somebody
You'd think you
whispers
would
to-
hear something.
Yeah, one
like
of
the
his
Josh
friends.
Allen thing coming out with Twitter. It's like,
Yeah.
how does that find the light of day? So
By the way, Rohan Smith, the linebacker, just went to the Chicago Bears.
He's from Clemson. I like
Nice.
this linebacker.
They like linebackers. They're
He
big
was-
on linebackers
But
in
here's,
Chicago.
now here's,
sorry,
an,
he's
here's,
from
an, in-
Georgia.
here- here's an interesting thought now. Okay, so you look at the next group. Now, Josh Rosen is still on the board. You got San Francisco. They're not taking him. Oakland's not taking him. Miami might take him. Tampa Bay's not taking him. Washington's not taking him. Green Bay's not taking him. And Arizona has been trying to trade up into the top to get one of the top 4 quarterbacks. So now, if you're Steve Keim, do you give up a second-round pick or something to just get ahead of Miami? So do you make a trade with Oakland, giving him a second-round pick and something else, and then you take Josh Rosen?
No.
To get ahead of Miami, you think
Yeah,
Miami's going to be a market?
believe it or not, even though they redid and gave all kind of proration into Ryan Tannehill's contract, Armando Seguello has been saying now for a couple of days they are contemplating taking a quarterback if a quarterback falls to him, which I think is silly, it's stupid, it's dumb, it's typical Dolphins now, and that's why they've been 8-8 since I think Dan Marino was like 12 years old.
Honestly, though, I mean, not to make excuses for him, if you have a whole year of Jay Cutler as your quarterback, that might impact your willingness to take another quarterback. Like, you're like, for the love of God, let's at least get someone in here that we can build around.
But would you – yeah, I'd be stunned based on what you just said. Their investment in Tannehill, I understand you had to do what you had to do last year.
They're paying him $19 million a year.
Yeah,
Coming off of knee surgery.
Well, yeah, unless they know something about his recovery that we don't. I don't know. That one just doesn't line up for me that they would be looking at a quarterback, personally. But
the linebacker from Georgia that was just taken, he's one of those guys that you can see takes a lot of joy in hurting people.
Which means he's a Dave Wyman kind of guy.
You say that like it's a good thing.
It is a good thing. He
said it with a smile.
Yeah, he did.
Okay,
He
well,
said it with a glimmer in his eye.
I didn't say injure.
Right.
Okay, hurt and injure is 2 different things. Hurt is when you take a guy's will away, and I don't want to see him injuring anybody, but he's like a kid flying around, so that's a pretty good spot. Went to Chicago, is that right? Yeah. So,
what sound does an opponent make when you take his will away?
Something like that.
It's this. He's tapping out.
Yeah.
He's tapping out.
I heard a player, and I will not name names, that said "ow" one time. Yeah, I heard him at the bottom of a pile.
So you had a lot of respect for him.
I can't
right?
name names.
Oh,
Jim.
okay.
Dave immediately had a ton of respect for this kid on the bottom of the pile, yelling "ow!"
It was partly because it was I was blocking on kickoff return, and I shouldn't have been, and my guy probably is the one that hurt him. But yeah, but no, it's fun to watch a guy like Roquan Smith, and I feel like he just has pure joy when he plays, and so yeah, good deal there for Chicago, and we'll see. Trubisky, I think, is the guy maybe that Elway was saying he didn't think he had an it factor in it, and we'll see how he comes out. He actually can run a little bit.
I was impressed with how he played last year.
Yeah.
Were you?
Yeah, I was.
You were?
When I saw him. When I saw Trubisky, I
was
thought
probably
that,
based on
was
your
that 35
expectations.
QBR impressing you?
no, like it wasn't the. But watching him play and manage games, I thought he was more composed than I thought.
I thought he
would
did
be.
lead him to a 5-win season.
Yeah.
Clearly, John's not as impressed as you were.
Well, here's the thing, though. You got to think of what was Danny's expectations.
Yeah.
Right.
I really, when they traded up to get him, I was like, that's.
I've done that too with
choice.
players. Where it's like I don't expect anything out of this guy, and if he makes a couple plays, you're like, oh, okay.
Well, that was odd because they had just given a truckload of money to Mike Glennon too.
Yeah.
$15 million a year.
Yeah.
Which, look, once you got him in the building and saw what you were getting for your $15 million, I don't blame him for drafting somebody else. Like, he looks like Big Bird.
He does, but how did they not know that about? He wasn't a rookie. He wasn't this entity that people hadn't seen.
Yeah,
right?
Tons of people do crazy stuff. Well, was it Brock Osweiler, the Texans signed without him even meeting with Bill O'Brien?
Mm-hmm.
Like that they didn't have the. So they saw him. They get in there and they're like, "We drafted him, or we
I like
signed him."
I like the fact that Ryan Pace, the general manager, didn't even tell John Fox that he was making that trade.
Really?
Well, now John Fox is on ESPN. My guess is Roquan Smith is a great choice for the Chicago Bears. Foxy's probably ripping it.
Yeah. Well, he's probably not so. We
We're
got
showing
sad eyes.
Rosen does not look happy.
We got sad eyes.
He's becoming this year's Aaron Rodgers, this year's Matt Leinart, as they show guys.
we got a smirk.
sitting
we got
back.
A smirk.
Well,
I think that
49ers aren't going to take
It was sad
Rosen.
eyes, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like we saw it.
49ers got Garoppolo. They're not taking Rosen.
No. It's like they're taking a linebacker. They're probably taking Tremaine Edwards, they're taking Tremaine Edwards or a cornerback, but it'll be a defensive player.
Mike McGlitch. The offensive lineman.
Oh,
right?
no surprise, Mike McGlinchey.
Second O lineman.
Brock did a thing on him on his morning. I listened to every morning. He was previewing a possible draft choice, and he thought he was one of the better offensive tackles that he'd seen. And I know Brock does a lot of college football, but yeah, so yeah, always use a good offensive tackle. And those guys, the longevity. I mean, it's a guy that can be in their franchise for a long time.
Their decisions, I think San Francisco, what we've seen from them, because their first draft pick last year was Solomon Thomas, the kid from Stanford that can really run. I was impressed with how he looked. And then Reuben Foster was a really good player. There's some questions about his status going forward. I know there were developments regarding the felony domestic violence charge against him. I'll be interested because San Francisco had a huge uptick, but it was after it stopped really mattering. They won their final 5 games?
5 games, right.
That were there.
It's about as soft a landing as you could find for Garoppolo to come in there, games that mean nothing.
Correct.
Right?
And statistically, he was not overwhelming.
No, he wasn't.
And you look at it, I think it was 7 touchdown passes and 5
picks.
Yeah. Like, it wasn't great, but there's going to be a lot of momentum build up around this. Joe Staley was a guy that they picked, made a first-round pick, and I remember when they chose him 10 years ago, that was kind of a surprise. Came out of one of the directional Michigan schools, and he became an anchor for them. So maybe they think this is sort of the next generation of a guy that can take care of that left side.
I guess that means that the big, tall Trenton Brown might be a little challenged to be able to keep that starting job. Because what is he, like about 6'7", 6'8"?
Yeah.
So now Oakland is on the clock. What do you see them doing, John? Because this
well,
is where you thought a trade could happen.
This is a
right
Vita
here.
Vea possibility. I mean, this could be cornerback. I mean, because they're desperate for cornerback help, so that can be one. They were interested apparently in McGlinchey, believe it or not, because again, their offensive line. They've got $40 million of average contract, $40 million a year for 4 of their offensive linemen. That's an average of 10 a year for 4 different guys. So they have a lot. They have to start paring off their payroll. And so Donald Penn's a little bit older. That's why they were looking at a tackle. But cornerback is going to be a possibility. Certainly, linebacker Tremaine Edwards.
Raiders traded the pick to the Cardinals. You think they're going?
Remember how I said I thought that was going to happen?
Is it Rosen? Is Rosen going there?
That's Rosen, yeah. So they wanted one of their top 4 quarterbacks. They probably get a second-round pick in return.
You think Bradford still ends up being their starter if they go Josh Rosen here?
Yeah. Yeah, and remember, they had to get ahead of Miami because they thought, as a lot of people do, Miami would take a quarterback, Rosen.
So what do you see Miami doing now? Assuming that the Cardinals go with Rosen, do you see Miami still going
corner?
You see him going cornerback?
Yeah, I see him going corner.
Okay.
I love the idea that Josh Rosen's going to be in the Seahawks division.
You want to see
him?
Yeah,
I do.
See him get lumped up?
Yeah. After seeing a hint of the sad eyes that are there, I think that's great.
I think he looks like that all the time, Danny.
You think so? Yeah. I don't know.
I love the fact that Jim Mora called him a millennial. He's always asking why. Why? Gee,
yeah, and see,
I'm going to Arizona.
Does that make him? Does that make him intelligent for some reason, like special?
Because he asks questions.
Yeah.
He's able to speak truth to power, Dave.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I should say though, I don't root against players because I want everybody to have. It was a great gig, man. I would still be playing if I could. Playing pro football was so much fun. Just being a professional athlete, you're being paid to play.
Do something you supposedly love.
Yeah, and I would always say I would do it for free, but maybe not at the end. But when I was beat up.
But that's been the question about him, right? Where is football on his priority ladder?
Yeah. And
people question his love of the game.
Right, and that's where I'm like, I don't know if he deserves it or not. I feel like you have to make a sacrifice for football, and it's when people treat it like it's not that great and they don't appreciate the opportunity they have, it kind of bothers me, and that's just the sense I get from him. But look, maybe I'm wrong, and but if he goes to Arizona, I hope that he's not good because, like you said, we're going to see him in the division.
I think how I've always looked at quarterbacks specifically, it's really hard to be a good quarterback in the NFL. Like, it's really, really hard. Even if you have everything completely squared away and you are one of the most solid, down-to-earth, responsible, like all of those things, it's really hard. If you don't have those things, and if you're attention hungry, or if you're insecure, or if you're someone who tends to point fingers, that it becomes almost impossible. And what I've seen from Josh Rosen, and this is more about his behavior than it is about anything about how he throws the ball, I don't think he's the kind of guy that's going to be successful. And I think he's the kind of guy that teams talk themselves into because of how he can throw the ball. And you're getting in there, and he's pretty good. UCLA got worse over the course of his 3 years there. Like, it was that's a terrible sign in my mind for a quarterback, because there's a lot of talent on that team, and there's a lot of possibility. And they did not get better over his 3 years that are there.
The details of the trade is in right now. Arizona moving up from 15 to 10. In return, Oakland gets a third-round pick, the 79th pick in the draft, and a fifth-round pick, 152. Now, this plays into what you're starting to think about, what Seattle can get when you're trading down from 18. And so, now you start to get into that third round, not the second round possibilities. So I know Steve Keim was telling people early in the week when the rumors were out that they were trying to trade into the top 10 or around there to get the fourth quarterback, that they weren't going to mortgage the future. A third and a fifth does not mortgage the future for Arizona.
It's amazing when you see the difference in value. So what we had, Tampa Bay traded from 5 back to 12, is that right?
Yeah, they get 2 second-rounders.
And they get 2 second-rounders. So that's 7 spots. Now you're seeing a team trade back 5 spots from 10 to 5, so they're making a shorter slide, and they're only getting a third and a fifth for that.
Yeah, third and a fifth. And, of course, earlier the Jets traded up from 6 to 3, and that was 3 second-rounders.
3 second-round picks.
One next year.
It's really interesting just how steep that price and how much it drops off.
By the way, has anything that's happened so far changed your opinion of what may or may not happen with Earl Thomas?
Not yet, no.
Not yet?
No.
Okay.
Although I think the one thing is that, better players are starting to fall, because now you're already 10 picks in, and Fitzpatrick, the cornerback from Alabama is still there. You still have Edwards, the linebacker. Good players are still, they're starting to drop a little bit thanks to this quarterback mix.
What is it, 5 quarterbacks? 4 quarterbacks.
4 quarterbacks.
4 quarterbacks in the top 10.
Yep.
Who's the next one off the board? Probably is Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson, yeah. And that'll be in the 20s, if that. It may be second round.
It's Goodell steps up to the mic here. We'll see how happy Rosen looks if he's the guy.
He's probably saying why.
Josh Rosen
Here he comes.
So there you go. He doesn't look overwhelmed. He doesn't look overjoyed.
Oh, he had a good smile there.
Kind of looks like Alex Smith a little bit to me.
Yeah, he does.
In the face.
Yeah.
Big bro hug.
Yeah. Why, Roger? Why? Why did I go
it's a
10?
long embrace. He's probably not in danger of getting fined by the commission at any time.
Does his attitude play in Arizona? See, it's because I could see him going to like a traditional, like an old school Chicago, Philadelphia, and I don't think it would play well there.
That's
Arizona. I feel like is a decent landing spot for him. Just if he is.
Arizona
abrasive.
never really turned on Leinart, even though Leinart didn't have much success.
Oh, but his attitude was awful.
Yeah,
but
that's what I mean.
Was just brutal.
But that's what I mean is that you didn't have people that were like writing him off after 2 years.
No,
I don't think it's not an unforgiving fan base.
Right.
Like
all right, let me throw this one out. Okay, for personalities, who was more unique as an Arizona Cardinal quarterback? Is it going to be Josh Rosen? Was it Matt Leinart or Jake Plummer?
I'll lean toward Plummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plummer had a wild hair. He also had a long history in that area. He was I love Jake Plummer.
Oh yeah, he was at ASU, right?
Yeah. They loved him there. And then he was a pretty good quarterback. He was in Denver for a while, and Shanahan loved him.
Yeah.
And then he got traded to Tampa Bay, and he wanted no part of Chucky.
And then he wanted to go live in the mountains.
Yeah, he plays racquetball. He's a big racquetball player.
Just walked away from it, which I know you can't relate to, Dave, when you've got all that money and opportunity sitting on the table to play this game you love, and he's going, nah, I'm going to go live in the woods.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
fine.
always surprising to me that when people opt out of that. But look, I think football is one of the – I remember when my son started playing, he went through his first double day, and he was probably in like 7th grade. And I said, how you doing? He goes, I'm dead beat. And, this hurts and that hurts, but it's awesome. You know, and that's kind of that's what you have to have that kind of love for it. And, Yeah, it's shocking to me that people walk away from that. But you see Rosen, I didn't know his mom was from Princeton, graduated from Princeton. His dad was part of the Wharton Business School.
That's correct.
Yeah. So maybe he is really intelligent.
Well, I'm sure he is, but there's intelligent and there's smart, so we'll see.
Are you intelligent?
I don't know, Danny.
He's a Stanford alum. What do you think?
See,
No,
but honestly, don't you think that Wyman should really like Josh Rosen because Rosen's a Y man?
A Y man. There we go.
He's always asking why.
All right, John. Are you
That was great, John. I loved it.
That is
You're
that
not
is
supposed to laugh at your own jokes.
that was
John.
very Danny O'Neill.
What are you talking about?
Yeah,
That
is Danny
sounds like
rubbing
it
off
wasn't
on
a
you?
compliment when you said it.
That
that
was
way.
very. I can see why you appreciate it, Danny. It's very much in your wheelhouse.
Why do you say that, Bob? Why?
So now the Dolphins are on the clock. I think there's no way on God's green earth they're going to quarterback.
No. They're not going Lamar Jackson. That's not happening.
Unless they've just gotten some horrible news on Tannehill and his recovery.
That's another one, John. I forgot to mention Lamar Jackson. You guys, I mean, he is so much fun just as a football player. It's like you almost want to have him on your team just so like he can run scout team for you or something. But where does he go?
I think he's going to go in the teens.
I've heard first round, and you know, for a long time there was a lot of people saying, well, there's no place for him in the first, second round, but he's just too good of a football player, man.
He's got a little bit of I have some of the same concerns about him that I had about Josh Allen, which is the accuracy. His accuracy is not great. He's an incredible. Watching him play, though, he's electric, and I think we've certainly seen over the past 10 years that NFL teams are much more willing to accommodate their offense to the skills of their quarterback, whether it was kind of what Bill O'Brien did last year with Deshaun Watson, to some extent what the Seahawks did with Russell Wilson and incorporating the read option there. I think that he's going to be good, but those questions about accuracy are definitely there.
Right now, the way it looks, you would have to think he's going to fall at the earliest to 27 to New Orleans or maybe 31 to New England. Here's the reason I say that. I mean, unless Miami takes him, which they won't, I mean, all these other teams have quarterbacks. Now that Arizona's out of the mix and has moved up from 15. And so this is almost like a situation that was there for Aaron Rodgers. All the teams have quarterbacks, and so he falls. New England could possibly take him at 23, but they need a tackle. So offensive tackle. So they're not going to take him with the first of two first rounders. Maybe New Orleans, if they really want a young quarterback, that could be the mix, or a team that trades up into the lower first.
Well, we'll see what the Dolphins are doing here. Roger Goodell up at the podium being booed, by the way, after every
Did you see what he did when it started? He came in with all these Cowboys greats, like Staubach was there, Troy Aikman. It was like boo insurance.
Minka Fitzpatrick out
He's
of
got-
Alabama.
That's right, Danny. It was like he was using a human shield.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
It was like if I was Troy Aikman, I was like, do not taint my legacy
And
here
they all
with
threw
your
footballs
stench.
into the
I
crowd.
won't tardy
Yeah.
your booze.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they would be there.
Well, and that was the thing, because the Ezekiel Elliott thing, right? I mean, he was not popular there.
Yeah,
so.
Rodgers up. I mean, right now, Jerry Jones, boo, Roger,
Yeah,
boo.
that's true.
Yeah.
Dude, Minka Fitzpatrick is wearing the Tony Montana suit. You seen that thing?
He's going to Miami.
I would say this, like he
Say
has
hello to my little friend.
he has has a black shirt on underneath. Like he should have gone just full bore and just had no dress shirt on, like full Tony Montana.
Little silk shirt.
This
Little
is the
silk
thing,
shirt
man.
with the chains.
You're gonna go to Miami. I should stop doing that.
I like how you just tapped out of that
Yeah,
impression right there.
I was like, there's nowhere good that's gonna end up.
So I guess
Danny's
the only
learning.
debate is going to be, is Fitzpatrick going to play corner or safety? Because he's good enough, he can play either
But he's a
position.
safety, right?
In
As a
college, yeah. But again, most people thought he was going to play corner in the NFL.
What's the weight range on him, John? Do you know? Is he like 215, something like that? So I'm just wondering, now they're starting to turn these safeties that are a little on the bigger side into linebackers.
He's listed at 204.
So, yeah, maybe not.
Just a shade over 6 feet, 204.
John, you said he's more of a corner type than anything, but yeah, I think it's kind of interesting what's going on in the NFL. I don't know if it's going to last, but you do see like Mark Barron down in Los Angeles. You see Dayon Buchanan with Arizona, and you see a lot of these safeties coming up and starting to play a little bit of linebacker.
Dave, he's 6 foot and an eighth, 204 pounds, and he's got 31.25-inch arms.
Yeah, so probably more of a corner than a linebacker then.
By the way, is this where we see Vita Vea go now? Tampa?
Very possibly.
Tampa
yeah.
at 12, and then
Tampa
we got
at 12
Washington
or
13.
Washington at 13. So we were.
This is kind of just looking at the mocks, which obviously aren't very accurate. But I'm just trying to get a feel for where people are projecting him. This is kind of the area we were talking about. I saw everything from 7th
here's going to
on.
be the interesting one because Derwin James could jump Vita Vea and then get Vita to go to Washington. That could end up happening.
Derwin James had a great combine, right?
Yeah.
Like his measurables jumped out to everybody there. Vita's a fun player to watch, and Vita just dominated the Apple Cup. Like he was absolutely crushed him. Where are you going?
Can I have my business, Danny? It's private.
Can you bring the mic with you wherever
Why,
you go?
man? Why, man?
Can you imagine if you leave the mic on? Yeah, I'm gonna make a trip to the bathroom.
Yeah, take it with you. Let's get a tour of the building or wherever you're going.
I'll be right back.
Dave
Hurry
Hyman's
back, Dave.
You'll be fine.
We're going to listen to Dave order food and then go to the bathroom. He'll come back. It'll be great.
It'd be good.
If for some reason Vita Vea fell to 18, would you be upset with the Seahawks for not taking him? Or do you look at this is where need versus talent goes, right? They do have a need for somebody that's like him, but we talked about the idea that they've got a lot of holes to fill.
Yeah, I think they'd make a mistake. I think
if they
didn't take Vita Vea.
If they didn't take him.
I think they'd be making a mistake. I think Vita Vea is a rare talent.
What do you think, John?
I think they're okay at defensive tackle, and I think they need players, not one player. And so unless it's a pass rushing defensive end, I think they'd have to pass on it.
Yeah, if they had a second and a third rounder,
different
I
story.
would agree with you. I would say, man, you got it. You can't afford not to take this guy. But because they just don't have these bites at the apple in the second and third round, I just think this is a weird year where you've just had too much attrition that you have to address. Personally,
I would say this though. I think Vita Vea can rush the passer as a defensive tackle. Like I think
you
that
think he's like a Warren Sapp type.
Yeah, I think he's that disruptive and that explosive, and that probably comes with my belief. I believe that's why they took Malik McDowell where they did last year, is because they thought that he was a defensive tackle that could rush the passer some, and when that didn't work out, when McDowell was injured, it then sort of set in motion. They needed to find somebody else that can do that. They've still got that need. I think Vita Vea can do that, and I think he would be a big enough value at that spot. I'd love to see what Pete could get out of him, because the only question about Vita Vea has ever been consistency of effort and getting him to play at that consistent tempo. I'd love to see if Pete could do that with him.
Well, we'll see if Tampa, their pick is in, so we'll see if it's going to be Vita Vea. But the Seahawks, to me, are showing some level of belief in what they've got on the roster as well, right? Allowing the guys to leave. They haven't really brought in any big names.
Yeah, it's
do you buy that as faith in Tedrick Thompson, as faith in Delano Hill, as faith in these guys that we haven't had a chance to see much of?
I think
Nas Jones, people like that.
I think they believe Nas Jones is a really good player. And I think that they think Tedrick Thompson, Delano Hill, and Nick Vannett are all going to be good players. I think that they believe they're going to be starting caliber guys that can contribute.
Nick Vannett,
now that was there. He's been behind two guys that they liked a great deal on the
he's
depth
been
chart.
hurt.
He had a sprained ankle. I think he could be of all the different guys that you look at. I think he's got a chance. If he's only catch 40 passes next season, score 5 or 6 touchdowns, I can see that.
Well,
kind
you
of
can
year
take
from
that
him.
off. Vita Vea just went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Did he? Is that the pick?
Yep.
All right. So Vita Vea is gone. We can no longer dream about him in a Seahawks uniform.
But by the way, what this is pushing right now, you still have Davenport, you still have Landry, and now there is a chance that one of the two could be there at 18.
Would that be a surprise to you?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
Not really. Some people had Landry going at 20,
Mm-hmm.
so that doesn't surprise me. But yeah, Vita Vea goes to Tampa.
Good for him. Good for him. It's an interesting outfit he's got going on there. Does he have a gray streak in his hair?
It looked like it. I don't know. Some of the kids are dyeing their hair gray these days, though. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Why is he wearing a Redskin outfit? It looks like a Redskin
That's
outfit.
a whole lot of allure, man.
Is that a velvet coat? What is that? Yeah, he's got like this gray streak in his hair. He's got an interesting look, but good for him, man. He's obviously
interesting.
ecstatic.
He could have. He had an opportunity to leave a year ago. I'd be real that question of where he would have gone a year ago, because I think he would have been probably a second or third round pick, and to come back and be the number 12 overall pick. I think must be pretty meaningful to him. And you see it, the run of Washington defensive players that have come out and been really highly drafted. It continues.
347. It's amazing to watch him at that weight do what he does.
Unbelievably
He's listed at
powerful.
347. I'm going to say he's probably a little more than that.
You think he's closer to 4 than he is to 350?
I'd take the over
Look
on
at that.
350.
He's wrecking the Cougs. Oh, this is beautiful.
I'll take the over on the 350 is where I would take him. Hugh Millen, just walking right in front of us. Don't even worry about it. You walk wherever you want. You're Hugh Millen. Yeah, he's look at him. Double teaming, he's splitting double teams. He's a monster. He's a monster. I think that's an awesome pick for Tampa Bay. I would love to have seen him in a Seahawks uniform, but at the same time, again, just getting back to the idea that they have so few picks as we sit right now. And there haven't been many trades. I mean, what have we had? 2 trades?
2 trades in which guys have slid down. You saw Tampa slide from 5 to 12 that we just did.
7 to 12.
Or 7 to 12. And then we saw
Get 2 second-round picks.
Arizona jump up from 15 to 10.
15 to 10 for a 3 and a 5.
Who's the next team to trade, do you think, John?
It'll be a while, I think.
Is it going to be Seattle?
Well, Seattle probably at 18. I know Detroit at 20. That's a possibility.
So Seattle might be the
But
next.
I mean, right now, coming up, you got Washington, Green Bay, Oakland, and you'll love this one. Story out of Oakland is that Tom Cable has recommended that they take Colton Miller as an offensive tackle.
Is he a kicker?
No.
Did he kick in college?
No, he's not.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so Tom Cable is making recommendations for what John Gruden should take on the offensive
I
line.
thought that was going to be the next conversion project. Is like, I like to make guys uncomfortable. We're going to take the kicker.
Yeah.
We're going to try him at center.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, so they made the recommendation to go for Colton Miller at 15.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what they
Yeah.
do. We'll see what they do. So you got Washington and Green Bay before they pick.
And Oakland and
And
Baltimore.
Washington was a team that was in the Vita Vea hunt.
Yes.
So now where do they go?
That's an interesting question. It's
Washington tends to like fast guys, right?
Like, yeah.
They tend to like speed. They signed Paul Richardson as a free
They
agent.
did, yeah.
Let's see who will be there. Did they bring Deshaun Jackson back?
No, he's in Tampa.
Tampa. So that's where Vita Vea just joins him down there.
Well, you still have Derwin James on the
Yeah,
board.
Derwin
Just looking
James
at
is-
some of the bigger names, you got Tremaine
Some
Edmonds
people now in Green Bay are starting to think they might go for Derwin James.
in
as
Green Bay.
opposed to
They already got Ha Ha
Davenport.
Clinton Dix.
Mm-hmm.
Have to add to that. Deron Payne is another guy. I really like the way Payne played. I
I think
thought,
there's a great chance he's in Atlanta
Yeah.
because they've got to get a defensive tackle. In fact, that's one of the teams I'm sure that's checked in with John Schneider. And of course, Atlanta's sitting there at the 26th pick because they've got to get in a position to get defensive tackles. They let Dontari Poe go. They're really thin at D tackle, and so if they feel there's going to be some runs on defensive tackles, that they may be calling up to Seattle.
Well, Washington on the clock. They got under 4 minutes to make up their mind here and see what they do. But so far, it's going to be interesting when it gets to 18 because I think if trades aren't happening in front of them and some of these players fall, some of the Derwin James or any of these other guys, I think there's going to be a strong segment of the Seattle fan base thinking they should use this pick. They should use this pick, and
I think that's a growing
adamantly
debate right
against it.
now.
What's that?
I think it's a growing debate.
I am absolutely against it.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's a difference maker. One guy is not going to fix what this team needs fixed or fill all the holes. He's just not there. There isn't
Unless
that
you
big
make
of a
the
difference
flop
maker.
and say, okay, if we're going to do this, now we have to trade Earl Thomas for a second and whatever. That's the only way you can justify it because you're right. They need players, not player. And so with that in mind, if you take the player at 18, you got to figure out something different to fill the rest of the void.
Such an interesting thing. I would tend to agree with John. If the Seahawks do end up picking at 18, I think it increases the likelihood that we'll see Earl Thomas traded.
Absolutely, because then you don't have a pick for 2 rounds.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You're going to bunch up some of your 5th round picks and try to. I don't think they have the ammunition to move up and address the needs that they've got, unless they feel like they've got a bunch of guys that are going to be free agents out there that don't get drafted. That they think, all right, we can fill the holes with these guys. I don't know how you do it. It's Earl or you trade down. Those are, to me, the only 2 realistic options to address what you
They
assume
need
is.
players, not player.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah, so we'll see what they do. But this is Seahawks never do anything we think they're going to do anyway.
No,
so
that's
maybe
true.
they do. They're going to draft a kicker with number 18 or something.
No.
They did.
No, they're not drafting.
I remember the year they took Kristen Michael and we were doing an appearance and somebody was asking, "What do you think they're going to do, Bob?" I said, "I don't know. They could go anywhere. The one place I know they won't go is running back. They're set. And then they draft Kristen Michael in the second round.
What's the most surprising pick that they've made in the sort of the early rounds, the first two
Based
rounds
on
of the
position
draft?
or name?
Just in general, because
Well,
I mean,
probably
you
go
see-
with Bruce Irvin because most people
Irvin,
third round pick.
Yeah, people thought he was a third round pick.
Well, Carpenter was a guy that, Nick Saban didn't seem familiar with him.
Oh yeah, remember the face of Saban when he's a Carpenter?
They couldn't even find video. Usually they run a little video of the kid in college, right? The pick is in, James Carpenter out of Alabama going to the Seattle Seahawks, and then they'd show a little montage, collection of clips. They had nothing on him.
Yeah.
Everybody sat there and looked around like, who? And by the way, Daron Payne out of Alabama now goes to Washington.
That's a pretty cool name for a defensive player. Payne.
If he spelled
My
it
prediction
P-A-I-N.
is Payne.
It fits, though. It fits.
And by the way, with two defensive tackles going back to back, that definitely has Atlanta on the phone.
Trying to figure out that they need to get up and get somebody. Yeah.
Whether
Would
it's
be there.
Hurst, the guy that had the heart problem.
Does that play against Seattle, though? Because if Atlanta's feeling that pressure right now, they might feel like they can't wait until the Seahawks get on the clock at 18.
Yeah, but I don't know if you got Green Bay, Oakland, and Baltimore and the Chargers thinking of trading down. Baltimore might. Baltimore would be that would if they really Baltimore would be the one team I think. Yeah, they might before Seattle trade down.
Yeah.
I mean, Green Bay right now. I mean, it could be Kerwin James. It could be Davenport. It's going to be a defensive guy most likely.
I haven't seen any wide receivers go, and that's not a surprise because this wasn't considered as strong. The kid out of Maryland is in many ways
DJ Moore might go to Dallas at 19.
right.
I mean, Baltimore might have gone for a wide receiver, but they've now signed 3 in unrestricted and restricted free agency. So
Let's
they're
see
probably
there.
out of the mix.
What's our balance? We've got
There's been a trade, by the way. The Saints are now on the clock.
Oh.
So they moved up into Green Bay's spot. I think
That's good. This could be the pass rusher in New Orleans.
Yeah, so you got the Saints, followed by Oakland, followed by Baltimore. So the Saints now sitting on the clock. What do they need, John? What are the?
They need a pass rusher. They didn't get one last year. They need one this year. So maybe it could be Davenport. And again, I mean, there's the talk that maybe this is a quarterback move, but it'd be a waste of traded draft choices if you're
who's
moving
the backup in New Orleans? Who's the backup in New Orleans?
It was I know the third quarterback that they had.
You know
'cause
the
he came
third,
in
but you don't know the second?
Yeah, because they kept a guy. I think he was an undrafted free agent. He ran a couple of trick plays for them. I think he was their holder.
Why don't you look on your computer machine?
It's more fun to try and figure it out.
The interesting thing is that the Saints gave up next year's #1 pick.
What?
The Saints just traded from 27 to 14
14 with the Packers.
for a #1 pick.
That
Next year's #1.
Next year's #1.
Huh. That is. Those are the kind of trades that come back and bite you in the butt. Like,
Although to get this trade, the Saints had to give up their 147th pick in the draft.
so that
So
would be their
mid-round pick,
fourth
yeah.
round.
Yeah,
So they first and their fourth.
yeah,
For a first and a first next year.
that's correct.
It's similar to, I remember that. This is how Seattle ended up with Earl Thomas, and it was a second-round pick.
Yeah.
That the Denver Broncos traded next year's first-round pick for a second-round pick from the Seahawks in 2009. They used it to take Alfonso Smith, I believe, a linebacker who lasted like 3 years on the team. Turned into the 14th overall pick that they ended up, and I remember that the Broncos had 2 first-round picks, and they decided to trade their own because they assumed that they were going to be better than the Bears, whose first-round pick was the other one that they had.
So the Saints sitting on the clock. See what they do. You still got Lamar Jackson out there. You still got Derwin out there.
But I mean, to trade it for Lamar Jackson when you have nothing ahead of you other than New England at 23, and it's like that's ridiculous.
But this is where the chess match and the deception comes into play, right?
Yeah, that's true,
You got
yeah.
teams in front of them sending out signals that they're interested in players that they know that the Saints are interested in. So
Yeah.
they now feel compelled to make that move.
Oh yeah, because heck, the Chargers could take Lamar Jackson because Phillip Rivers is getting older.
There you go.
The backup quarterback in New Orleans, it's a name that you once called me.
Is it something I can say on the air?
Yes.
What is it?
Tom Savage. Because you referred to me as a filthy little savage.
That's when he put fish on my microphone, and it turns out it was Brock.
Yeah, shocking that Brock would do something to instigate it. And Taysom Hill is the name of the number 3 quarterback.
The guy you were thinking of?
The guy that ran trick plays.
Okay.
Yeah.
I sit where Graz sits, and he puts stuff on the microphone too, but it's not on purpose.
No, it just falls out of his face. Usually it lands on his belly, but every once in a while a chunk will make it to the mic screen. Everybody wins.
A lot of people are thinking this is going to be a Marcus Davenport selection, the pass rusher.
Okay. So that, I guess you were talking about that as a need for them.
Yeah, because they didn't
sense.
do it last year, and they needed to. And now, I mean, again, they had a great draft. You can't criticize anything that they did other than not getting a pass rusher, which I criticize them for. But, they hit on 4 draft choices.
You had Kamara. You had the corner.
Lattimore.
Yeah, Lattimore that was really good. The safety, Marcus Williams, was really good. Still, man, when you trade next year's first-round pick, like that's how you end up just biting yourself in the butt. Like, because you're like, I will gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. And it never ends up. Like, that's how you – because if you're terrible now, then you don't even get a first-round pick next year. These are the sort of decisions. I think teams end up regretting these.
Well, that's just showing what? Too much belief in what they've got going on.
Either
right?
that
they
or
think they're better than they are. They're
yes.
gonna have a better record, so they think, next year's first-round pick is going to be toward the bottom.
Or they're so in love with the player that they sort of lose all. Or the third thing is the people in charge start to think, well, I might not be here next year anyway, so
Let's go for it.
I better pull the trigger right now.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, how are you?
So you
How'd
hear
that go
about
for
the
you?
trade, Dave?
Yeah, I did. I think it's a good point Danny brings up about you'd have to be careful of if you've got a staff that is on the hot seat, and if you're, the owner and president thinking, okay, what's your rationale here, and is it some kind of a desperate move or something like that? So a lot of things to go into this. It's got to be one of the more confusing things on this day. I just can't imagine how organized you need to be, and now you're looking at like maybe even next year's draft, to see, there's nobody that we think is going to be that good next year.
Are you surprised we never see anybody throwing things at each other in a draft room? And I'm not even talking about like getting mad over the pick, but like just too many people talking when somebody's on the phone where they're like,
Hey, shut up.
Yeah.
My dad used to talk.
You don't remember when Mike Tice was at Minnesota, and remember they were having all those listening debates, and not that they threw things at it, but they didn't get the pick in.
They didn't. They missed like two picks,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
That they ended up. Was that?
Yeah, because at that time the
Who picked?
hierarchy
Was it Jacksonville that took their pick that year?
I think
or
two
did
teams
Jacksonville
leaped
miss
them.
the pick?
Yeah, but Minnesota missed on 2 because 4 people were tied for the decision maker, and they couldn't make the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Jim Moore, I've told this story a million times. He told me that there was a debate over taking me in San Diego, John, in 1987, and like it was the
Are you
owner
leaving now?
and the-
Yeah, I'm going to eat something. I'll be back shortly.
Oh, okay.
It's very informal here at Seahawks draft headquarters. Tell us about the fight, Dave.
Oh, it was just an argument between 2 guys, over which player to take, and so I'm sure that that goes on a lot, Probably not fist fights, but that kind of stuff.
My dad used to tell me a story. His father ran a grocery distribution business, and that he would spend a lot of time on the phone, and that at night, if the kids were, my dad had 8 brothers and sisters, if the kids were being too loud, their father would fire a L.A. County Yellow Pages at them, which was fearsome and intimidating.
Yeah, I'll bet. So it's an interesting deal, and this was one of the places, John, that supposedly Jackson was going to go to.
No, I mean
New Orleans.
If they gave up a number 1 pick next year to get Lamar Jackson, somebody better be losing their job
that would be
in New
insane.
Orleans. Now, this sounds like it's going to be Marcus Davenport.
But, okay, Lamar Jackson is a guy that I think people have said they might change their offense for. Who would that be?
Again, it's like that would be New England, I guess. New England and New Orleans, I think, have interest in him. Here we go. Marcus Davenport. Like I say, they needed the pass rusher. So Davenport goes off the board. And what's interesting is that they had that need for the Green Bay Packers of Davenport to maybe be a linebacker, and now that's not going to happen because they traded it away. Of course, Green Bay does get a number 1 pick next year.
Dave, he's really tall. I think he's like 6'7". Marcus Davenport is. How does that affect a defensive player?
I don't know. You got long limbs, you know, but he's got to play low. That's the thing I think in the NFL was the hardest for me is you really have to stay low. So I was 6'2", and I always thought, oh, man, I wish I was 6'4", 6'5". But then I saw players like Sam Mills that were 5'9", 5'10". It's easier for them to get low. So, I mean, he's gonna have, I don't want to say struggles, but he's going to have to be very mindful of his pad level. You can play a lot higher. I mean, that's not going to happen, what you're seeing on TV right now in the NFL, where he just entirely bull rushes, you know, a running back. They're going to cut you. And, you know, so he's going to have to play low to the ground. He's going to have to try to use his hands a little bit better. But he was a guy that supposedly the Seahawks were going to take with the 18th pick, a lot of mock drafts. And University of Texas, San Antonio. And I think during the Combine, somebody mistook it for something else. Remember, he had some little thing like, oh, yeah, that's not the school I went to or whatever. But it's one of those places that we had a guy here who was a safety from UTSA a couple years ago that they really liked. And can't remember his name, but that's kind of an up-and-coming sort of program down there. But, yeah, for him, I mean, I think that's going to be the biggest problem is leverage. But somebody has made the determination that he's able to get low. Good example would be K.J. Wright. K.J. Wright is a tall guy with long limbs, and, you know, I thought he was going to struggle to get leverage, and he didn't. So if he's able to do that, then, you know, that'll be and I'm sure they already looked at a lot of film and decided. I watched a highlight tape of him. I wasn't that impressed. I didn't see like a lot of explosiveness or what Pete calls suddenness, you know. But we'll see.
But remember, this is not a great pass rushing draft, and so these are still the best of the group, and there's a drop off, and so sometimes you may have to take a little bit less to see if you can get the most out of it.
You see, this is the second defensive end that we've seen come off the board.
Yeah.
The first being Bradley Chubb, who out of NC State. John, you had mentioned this, and Adam Schefter kind of reporting what you'd heard, which is that Atlanta's probably one of the teams that's trying to come up to Seattle's pick at number 18. The Seahawks are trying to move back. Another team that was mentioned, Detroit
at 20.
At 20, trying to come up. So
outside chance of Baltimore. Yeah,
so we'll see as things start to sort of shape up here. But the fact that there aren't as many, because look, defensive ends, you've said it, that sacks are really important. Sacks are really, really valuable. That will be there. Okay, we're going to go to 710 ESPN Seattle. On the radio, so you can tune your dials now to 710 a.m., and we'll stay here as well. You can keep watching us on Seahawks.com as well as 710sports.com.
We're going to be on the radio in about 5 minutes.
Good.
Hey, can I